This webinar is going to be recorded and is being recorded, and you can get it on our website, Westview Methodist Church website, so you can rewatch or re-listen or distribute it as you will. Awesome. So that was a lot of speaking from my side. So enough speaking from me, and I'm going to hand over to Anton. Thank you so much, Anton.
Good evening, everybody. I hope you're all safe and well and enjoying this time with your families. Now, this virus has really changed our lives, hasn't it? And for me, sometimes I think it's changed it in a good way. Now, I've received a question about how you can assist your kids and the teachers during lockdown learning. And I thought I just want to say to you that our education system is rather old. And the way we do things in South Africa, teaching is sometimes a little bit archaic. If you look at the classroom setup, the typical classroom setup at a typical school, then you will find that classroom looked exactly like it does now about 100 years ago. And we have been stuck in a very content-driven way of teaching. And our teachers over the years have tried their best to change things, but quite often the bureaucracy cannot be changed so easily. So what we needed some form of outside intervention that would shake everything up. And this coronavirus has done exactly that. It has changed up the way we look at teaching. It changed the way we look at education. And I hope it's done so that we can actually improve our education going forward and try things in a new way, in a different way. So for you as a parent, what I want to say to you is during this time, I wouldn't worry too much about the content that my child might be missing. Your child is more important than the content. And the education is about the child, the person. At the end of the day, as teachers, we don't really teach content, we teach people. And it's our job as teachers to make sure that we send out a person at the other side who's going to be a responsible member of a society who's going to change this world. And during this time, your children are going through tremendous stresses, emotional stress. And for some of them, it's a fairly traumatic experience on the one hand. On the other hand, I can tell you that the younger your child is, the more they're going to enjoy lockdown as well. Because for the first time in a long time, they actually got their families together. And that feels like paradise to them. So you would have experienced that. Okay. The only kids that's really stressed in terms of content that we should really look after in this case is our matrics. Because they have to write the matric exam at the end of this year, and they are writing it on a full curriculum. Nothing's been trimmed for them because that matric certificate cannot be of a lower standard than previous years. Otherwise, it will be tarnished forever. So our matrics are going to write the normal matric exam, but they are going to have less preparation than what previous matrics had. So it's going to be a more difficult situation for them. So if your child is in matric, they need your support. Okay, because things are going to be difficult, and they need to understand right now already that they have to take ownership. And if you want to do something as a parent to help your child in this process, then I want to say to you that what's happening now in terms of this whole lockdown and the way we're doing education, you know, for us at Sutherland High School, we are very much online at the moment. So a lot of our teaching is happening online, and that's exactly what your child will experience when they go to university. So I believe that this system that we are following now is preparing the kids better for university than what the old traditional teaching at school used to do. Because we very much used to a system where the teachers have to do everything, and they have to drive the process. And we just drive content, and the kids sit back. And it's like they just sit there and they say, well, bring it. And now they can't. You know, so what's happening now is the child has to take ownership of their own journey. And that is fantastic. That is exactly what we want. It's important that the children now learn self-discipline to actually embark on this journey themselves. And that is what I want you to encourage your child with. They must take ownership. Obviously, you can't do that with a grade 1 child or a grade R child. But if your child is in high school, then they should now be taking ownership of their own learning and their own destiny. And it's a fantastic opportunity to actually do that. So I want to encourage you, if you've got a high school child, that's specifically who I'm talking to now, then I want you to make sure that your child is organized, they've got a routine, they know their classes, they know when what is happening. You need to remember that from grade 8 through to grade 11, they're going to be on a reduced learning timetable for the rest of the year. So they're going to have about 50% of the contact time than what they used to have, because we need all that physical distancing in the school. And it is just simply impossible to bring everybody back, because you can't. You don't have space. You don't have enough teachers. So your child is in high school, your typical high school child is going to have a lot less contact with the teachers. Therefore, there's going to be a lot more work that they have to do by themselves. And that is crucial that we understand that. So the child that expects everything to be done for them are not going to cope well in this. They have to change their mindset. They have to adopt a system whereby I am taking ownership of what I'm doing, and I am going to drive this process myself. The children who do that, I'm telling you now, ladies and gentlemen, your children are going to do so well at university, because that is exactly what's waiting for them. You know, I'm sitting here with a university student in my house, a fourth-year engineering student, and luckily he's a type of person that's tremendously disciplined. He's got enormous self-discipline. So he loved lockdown. His marks have improved so much studying by himself rather than going to class. It's amazing. And that is how different people are different. But the thing is, he has taken ownership of his own journey. And that is what I want to encourage you. So if you want to help your child, then that is what you got to make sure. You got to make sure that your child has the right habits in this time, that they do not waste their time with a whole lot of other things that's distracting from the real purpose. They need to spend enough time on what's really important for their futures. That is critical. And that is what I want to encourage you. If your child is in primary school, then I want to say to you, content is not that important. Okay, your child is important. Their emotional development is what's important. They need a lot of your support and your touch. And I think Catherine is probably going to speak a little bit more about the primary school kid as well. But I want to say to you that during primary school years especially, and even the lower years of high school, ladies and gentlemen, it's a child. It's their emotional development. You must remember with this thing now that came across our path, a lot of the younger teenagers, now I've got a lot of contact with grades 9, so it's 14-year-old kids. For some of them, they felt that their entire future has been erased. What's the point? There's no future. There's no hope. And it's our job as parents to just bring them back to the fact that, listen, my boy or my girl, the best is yet to come. This is something that's happening now. It's going to make you a better person. And if you deal with this well, you are better equipped for the challenges that the future is going to bring across your path. Our future is not over. And that's what the kids need to hear. They need to hear that there are still plans and that they still have hopes and that they can still move forward. And that is just what I wanted to share. Are there any questions on that topic? Okay, looks like I'm good.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Anton, for your input and just for your wisdom and your expertise on the topic, and for coming and sharing with us. Just a note to everyone, Anton has another meeting now at 7. So I think he'll stay with us for a little bit longer, but if you see him heading off, that's because he's going to his other meeting. So if there's any other questions, otherwise we're going to hand over to Zuko, and he's going, well, to Zuko and to Damien, they're going to be giving some insight on what are some practical steps that we can do or give to assist our kids in balancing schoolwork with anxiety and other issues faced during lockdown. So Zuko is going to be looking more at the perspective of our kids, and more specifically those in high school, because those are the guys he deals with. And then Damien is going to give a little bit of a perspective from parents. Thank you so much, Zuko.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, James. And to Mr. Venter, thank you very much. Also, I think I might repeat a couple of things that, Mr. Venter just put on the table. But I think from the beginning, I don't want to become too prescriptive, because I think every child is different, every household is different, and every experience is different. I think that's the reality. If we look at schools at the moment, some schools have had the luxury of being able to go online. Some schools are back there open, and some schools are not. Some schools are still facing issues of just the basic resources of even just having textbooks. And so, yeah, I don't want to be too prescriptive, and I don't think that will do this topic justice. But just to read the question that we were given, what are some practical steps that we can do to assist our kids with balancing schoolwork and then also have that tension with anxiety that they're facing? And I think from a point of departure for myself is to understand, and I'm echoing what Mr. Fenter just said now, is that schoolwork isn't the big thing. Like schoolwork is one of the things. And a lot of the anxiety that our learners are facing, and obviously I'm speaking more from a high school perspective, has to do with a disruption to the things that they were used to. A teenager is looking, especially in this time, they're looking for identity. They are looking to build meaningful relationships with their peers. They want a sense of independence. They're trying to think of the future, careers. That's where a lot of them are. They're still solidifying their own values and even their faith. And so a lot of that got disrupted. And so I think for me, my first thing would be where a teenager usually is, how can we restore that, even though it's going to be packaged differently in this time? Because schoolwork is there. Schoolwork is not going to disappear, right? It's really not going to disappear. But however, a lot of them are worried about their friends. They haven't seen their friends in a long time. So some of their friendships are, I don't say they're taking strain, but they miss that. A lot of them found confidence on the sports field or during extramural activities. And so a lot of that has been taken away. And so they're like, what must I do now? Some of them were exploring careers. They're exploring what happens next. I'm thinking about the matrics and the grade 11s. And a lot of that has been halted. And so a lot of the anxiety issues, I think, are coming from outside factors and not necessarily the schoolwork per se. And so, yeah, I think Johan and Heidi, they did a good job of unpacking these issues in the previous webinar. But if I think of practical things that I can share, and Damien, please, let's piggyback here where we can. I think the first thing is as parents, to engage on those things that our kids have lost, or they feel like they've lost. I think creating a sense of hope that this is not the end of the world. And Mr. Fender said that now, it's really not the end of the world. We've come across these things before. And I think another big thing is, for me, that I can say is a really big thing, is routine. Learners need a sense of routine. I've spoken to kids who, they have no routine whatsoever. They're waking up at 11 o'clock, they eat, they play games the whole day, and then at some point they think about doing schoolwork. But if us as teachers and as parents can come through and help them get a sense of routine, waking up at a reasonable time, helping around with chores, doing exercise, those basic things, just to help them. A lot of them don't have those skills, and we need to teach them those skills. And these are skills that we take for granted. How do I schedule my work? How do I make sure that it's not overwhelming? Especially as schools now start going back into normal physical contact school, a lot of them are feeling overwhelmed that, I'm so behind in so much work. How do I catch up? And so I think just practically, it might mean sitting down with your child, your teenager, and saying, cool, this is what's happening next. Let's make a routine. And I think one of the biggest questions, I think, as a parent that we can ask is, how can I help? A lot of them are feeling helpless. And so just to engage with those questions. Yeah. Damien, what do you think?
Just on that, man, I mean, I have to agree completely with what you say is, it's all about routine as well. But, when we look at the anxiety just from parents, now note, I'm also a youth leader. I'm very involved with the parents. I chat to a lot with, especially when it comes to coaching hockey as well in my spare time. I've got that connection with parents already. And some of them feel like, they're not equipped to help them with their studies, if I can put it in that sense. But like Zuko just said, it's all about routine. But what we don't realize is if you are a role model, a guardian, or even a parent, your kids actually look to you mainly when it comes to times like this. Like, for example, if you are scared and fearful, they'll almost probably pick it up and go, hang on, why is mom and dad, fearful, or why are they scared of, something that I can't see? Sometimes, as for me as a youth leader, sometimes I'm seen as a brotherly figure, or sometimes for the younger kids, I'm seen as a father figure, depending on the age. But we need to realize is, as parents, we actually need to keep calm. That's it, keep calm and do X, Y, Z. But it's not that easy. I'm not going to say it is easy, because at the end of the day, it's not. Because when lockdown happened, no one expected, schools to go straight online, and parents weren't, like, how can I put it, prepared. And sometimes that's where the anxiety comes from, is that, oh my word, what do I do? Well, like Zuko said, get into a routine. For example, if you find your kid sleeping at 11 o'clock and you also drag them out of bed, say, come, let's do this. Get them excited for the day, even if they're not at school. For example, my sister, she's in Sutherland at the moment, and just by seeing what Sutherland is doing, they're not only equipping the kids, but they're allowing the parents to know, listen, this is the plan, this is what's happening. The nice thing is, parents, you might just link up with the school, allow the school to help you as well, especially during this time, because I always say, kids aren't stupid, because at the end of the day, they know a little bit more than us sometimes. Trust me, I'm getting older as I go, and my sister that's like 10 years younger than me is already like surpassing me in certain things, and I'm like, well, I didn't even know about that. But if we plan and we keep calm, those are the two main things, is build a routine for your child. I mean, even if it's online school, have a dedicated space where that your child can thrive, not like, say, keep them in the bedroom, because sometimes what happens, they lie on their bed, they fall asleep. It happens at times. But like, for example, have a dedicated space, build that routine, say, okay, this space means school, and then when they go out of that, they can go, okay, now I'm at home. That space means school. This means I'm off. And once they get used to the routine and they start realizing what to do, you'll find that you as a parent can feel a little bit more confident as well, because at the end of the day, you don't want to feel unworthy to help your kid in schoolwork. Yes, some of the stuff is mind-boggling, but at the end of the day, you don't want to feel that oh my word, it's overwhelming. The nice thing is, if you've got contact with teachers, contact them. They are there to support you. Yes, even though when it comes to this, one of the big things I've actually been saying to a lot of my friends, as well as people that I know that have youth or kids or whatever, I always say, listen, in the future, please don't blame the teacher as well, because at the end of the day, they're also trying their best as well. So as a parent, I definitely, not me as a parent, but for parents, I would definitely say, be confident in yourself, number one. Number two, keep calm, because everyone is in the same boat. And the last one is, I would definitely say, build that routine, as Zuko said.
Yeah, if I can just come back from you there, I think it's nice what you said earlier about how the kids can see when the parents are stressed out, and I think one of the things that I've picked up with my own learners is that they worry about their parents. They really worry about their parents, and because there's a lot that's on their shoulders. And I think something that I would really encourage is having honest conversations in the house. If things are changing, our kids are not immune to it. They can see that mom is stressed out. They can see that dad is stressed out. And I think let's have those honest conversations. And if I think about teenagers, they do want a sense of independence, but also want to feel like they're adding value. And I think you know, if we just keep all the major issues aside, they can easily feel like, you know, okay, cool, I'm not needed, so I'm just going to stay in my room. Let's have honest conversations. Let's talk about what is happening at work. Let's talk about the standards that we expect from them. Let's set those standards, and just be very real with them. And I think those conversations really they make a difference. And so, yeah, I think on the points that we've put together, just having a good routine, creating an environment for them. So what room you should work in, what room you shouldn't be working in. I think those are crucial. Damien, you spoke about those resources. So to link up with your teacher, link up with your school, and just having those good conversations, real honest conversations. I think that might be some practical things that we can do. But every household is different, and every teenager and every child is different. So, you know, there isn't one way of doing this. Quite frankly, I don't think that there are wrong ways at the moment. And so I think as parents and as teachers, we do the best that we can to support. So let's try different things, and you know, different things will work for different people. Yeah, so that's all from my side. Thanks. Yeah.
I see we also have a question here asking, you know, some negative routines and habits have been formed in the last few months at home. What suggestions would you make to change that? Well, you know, breaking a negative habit now, myself as a life coach, I mean, I deal with this a lot, but, you know, I'm not going to say it's going to be easy, because sometimes going into a negative habit is easy, but going into that, you know, the one that you're supposed to be in, it's never an easy thing to do. Sometimes it's like, I want to do that negative thing, but you know what we do, especially here at home, because I live in the cottage on same premises as my folks, and what we do is, like, normally when it was hard lockdown and we couldn't you know, go to work or anything like that, what we did was at lunchtime we all ate lunch together. And then from there, once we were finished lunch, we went to our designated areas. Like for me, I work a lot online. So I'll go and I'll be in front of my laptop, making sure I do that. It all depends on, like, your ages of kids as well. You know, at the end of the day, you're not going to get them to do a thing like for 5 hours. Sometimes you're going to have to be a bit lax here and there. But I would definitely say, you know, depending on what you need to do, you know, it like build a routine where you know it's going to work, and what also, you know, how it will suit them. Because I mean, you know your child more, actually, you know your child best, more than the teachers, more than us. I mean, you live with them, you know how they run. And at the end of the day, like for example, going to school is different. They have to be at school. But I definitely say, you know, set that environment, like a certain environment, as I said, you know, have that, let's say that desk over there is yours. You're going to do your schoolwork there, go there. And then just like, for example, if there's certain classes, let's say, for example, if you're in grade 11, for example, or if you've got a kid that's in matric, you just make sure that, you know, okay, these are the times that they're supposed to be doing work. Get them, make sure that they've got access to those classes if they can. If not, make sure that they can actually, you know, get the work from somebody, even if the teacher is available. Ask them, listen, unfortunately, we couldn't do it. You know, we live in South Africa. Unfortunately, internet is not exactly the strongest at the moment because everyone is at home and the connection is very unstable. But, you know, you do have that option of, you know, reaching out. So where you can, just, I think, you know, just try and build as best as you can. I mean, at the end of the day, it's not going to be perfect, but if you try your best, at the end of the day, it will be fine. I don't know if you've got anything to add as you go.
Yeah, I think that was a very real question. That's a very real question. And I think, you know, I think we've said this a couple of times, but every household is different. But I think some pillars do stand, even in the face of bad habits and positive habits. I think, especially like with, yeah, I'll start off with teenagers, and I think Catherine, if you can maybe take over, and if you can, yeah, just give input into the younger ones. But yeah, what I would really suggest is planning. I think planning. A lot of bad habits can sometimes just start because we didn't plan for it. You know, we had so much free time and then we just do whatever we wanted, or we just had to, or in survival mode, things just had to happen. But I think um, simple things of, you know, maybe at the end of each day, I sit with my kids and I ask them, cool, what do we need to tick off tomorrow? Okay, we have an assignment that we need to get done. There are these chores that you need to do. There are the following things. Okay, let me think about matrix. You say you want to start applying for something for next year, so let's start applying. So we are creating environments for positive things to happen. If we don't create the environment, then anything can happen. So I think to be, yeah, to take the time to set those standards, to make a list. If we have to, it's going to take a bit of time obviously to have those kind of conversations, but to say this is what we need to do, and then at the end of the day, then we check what have we been able to accomplish, which is fantastic. Some things might carry over into the next day, but if we can create those pillars for our teenagers to work in, I think that might be a way to just to help create positive habits. Catherine, what do you think in terms of that question about how do we undo negative habits that have formed?
Yeah, I think this is a life issue, right? Because it doesn't only pertain to children. It definitely pertains to adults as well. And we all find that we slip into bad habits. And as a primary teacher, you know, you walk into a classroom on the first day, and any primary school teacher will tell you that the first 6 weeks is absolutely crucial for creating that classroom environment, that classroom community, and that discipline. Because after 6 weeks, the negative habits set in, and then anybody who's a teacher will be able to tell you that if you're not kind of strict with your discipline, Zuko, you probably know this, at the start of the year, it's hard to rein that in later on in the year. Yeah. So I completely understand this problem from a parent's perspective, because you've started, lockdown was just thrown at you, you know, and you're just sort of dodging the bullets, and you have your own responsibilities, your own job, your own routine, and now you've got to try and squeeze your children into that and still maintain your own professional working environment, etc. And all of this happens in your home. So it's, I think probably the biggest problem that parents, a practical thing that parents are struggling with. And I'm going to address it in my chat later as well, but I think that you have to press the reset. If it was me, because I have 3 daughters, Sarah's 17, Hannah's 15, and Emily's 12. So I have a primary and 2 high school girls. Yeah. And if it was me, I would probably just sit down and have a conversation and say, right, I can see that we've developed some bad habits. We're not sticking to a routine, you know. Ask them, how do you feel about that? How does it make you feel? Get them involved, give them voice, choice, and ownership in that conversation, and then sit down together and draw up a routine together that works for the whole family. So definitely need, as you said, Zuko, make them part of those conversations. Children need to have choice, and they need to be able to make choices, and that gives them power. The frustration sets in when they can't make choices and everything is done for them. So I think that the most important thing would be to, and I mean, I have actually had times with my own girls where I can see, not during lockdown, but I can see there's a behavioral pattern, a habitual behavioral pattern developing, and I've had to sit down with them and say, right, we're all not handling this well. Me included in that. And let's talk about how we can make this work. As your mom, this is how it makes me feel. And how do you feel? And then especially my teenage girls, we've developed quite a good relationship. They can say, but Mom, why don't you trust us? There was an issue of cell phones at one stage, and I was trying to limit their cell phone use, and, you know, typical parent of a teenager conversation, right? And I was saying, like, I want the phones down, and, you know, we live in China, so they have a totally different schooling environment with a lot of pressure, and they work until like 11 every night. And And I was just like, you know, you girls can't be on your phones. And then they sat down and we had this open conversation about it. And we agreed upon, we leveled the playing fields and we agreed upon something. And they just said, Mom, why don't you trust us? You know, and then I had to back off and say, fine, you know, I'm going to trust you. I'm going to give it to you. And so when I feel like they're overstepping the mark now, I have the authority to say to them, we have an agreement, you know, like, is your work done? Are you being responsible? And so now we have a mutual understanding, and that is totally doable with a grade 1 kid or a preschooler, because I've done it. It's just a different level. It's just not the same level, but you can have that conversation and set up structures and routines. So if you're a mom and you feel like your house is just a crazy space right now, and you really need to set up new structures and routines, you need to take some time to yourself, think about how you can do this, and then you need to sit down with your children and say, right, today we're setting up a new structure. Stick it on the fridge and continue from there. So that's what I would suggest. Thank you.
No, that is great. Yeah, and I love the part about voice, choice, and ownership. I think that's, yeah, those three things has really like hit it quite well there. No, awesome. Thanks a lot. James, is there anything else from the questions or from the floor that you'd like us to engage with or unpack, or could we then hand over to the next part?
Yeah, just a question that I received. I know Catherine is going to touch on it a little bit now in a presentation as well, but just to put it out there, just to get Zuko and Damien, just to get your mind brewing on the question, and then after Catherine gives her presentation, and if there's something that you maybe want to just add to this question, or just in general, you can. But we've got a question around motivation, and again, it's also from both sides. So one in that, or from all three sides, so parents, young children, as well as high school. So the question is around motivation and the actual want to do something, or the need to do something, so needing to do schoolwork. So this particular high school kid is basically, there's no desire to attend class, there's no, you know, sleep late, basically will miss class, etc. This kid is I think 16, 17. So that's the high school boy. And then just in terms of the parents themselves with the kids, it's really finding the motivation to juggle between excessive workload and trying to get meetings done, while then being motivated enough to then still teach your young kids of like 6 years old, and so one 6 and one 3 or 4, I think, to then actually get them to do their work and to actually want to do the work, you know, because I think that's something innately that happens. You don't necessarily want to go to school, but when you're at school, you're at school, and that's, you know, it's like built-in motivation. Yeah, so that's the one question. So you guys can stew over that, and then I think I'll hand over to Catherine. Thank you, Catherine.
All right, thank you. I can see that I'm surrounded by very sensible educators here, and between Zuko, Damien, and Anton Fenter, we're all pretty much saying the same thing, even though we come from different sort of backgrounds and perspectives. As was mentioned before, I grew up in Westview. I'm a believer. My faith in Jesus is my rock and guides everything I do, I hope, and all my decisions every day. And so I have a more formal presentation to share with you, which I hope I hope answers the questions, and then we can answer. Yeah, I'll try and cover some of the questions, but I'm going to go through the slides because I think it covers a lot of what has been said already, but maybe just in a pre-primary and a primary sort of pattern of thinking. So there's my email address, and if you need to contact me at any time, please feel free to email me. I'm always excited about discussions and yeah, connecting, helping parents with their children. So I am a mom, and I have 3 daughters, and that's my husband, Jack. And as I said, 2 of them are in high school, and my youngest is in grade 6. And I'm a believer. I was a young believer at Westview, and then have moved around the world. And so I studied at Tux, and then I taught in South Africa in various schools, and I did Montessori training as well. And then I moved to Lesotho, Malawi, and now I'm teaching in China. I've taught preschool and primary school students. I've been an upper primary head teacher in Malawi, and right now I'm the curriculum coordinator for maths and for the primary years program in IB, which is an international curriculum at the Canadian International School of Hefei. So I just want to paint a picture for you of what your child is. Your child is a sensory being. So at a time like this, their needs are heightened. Their sensory needs are heightened. They will be needing more physical connection. Many parents are saying that they're seeing physical aggression and levels of frustration in their children. So you need to make time for those physical connections, those cuddles, tickles, sitting on the couch, dads wrestling with their boys, and allow time as well for sensory experiences where they can run on the grass, play with Play-Doh, slime, baking, squishing their fingers in flour, especially for our youngest children. When I first arrived in China, I taught a class of 2- and 3-year-olds. And most of the students were Taiwanese, and a couple of them are Korean and Chinese, and never been away from home. And naturally you get the tantrums and throwing themselves on the floor and kicking and screaming. But we had a table where there was Play-Doh, and we could always call those little 3-year-olds to the table and just put a little ball of Play-Doh in their hand, and they'd just, the sensory experience of that would just calm them down and help them to process their emotions. And it doesn't need, there's a great recipe online, homemade Play-Doh that I've been making. My mother made it as a child, and I've been making it my whole teaching career. It uses cream of tartar. Make it. It costs you nothing. You can use the cutlery in your drawer, and you can create a sensory experience at your dining room table. And then, as I said, various sensory experiences. It's winter now, so water play is obviously not recommended, but that will help your children process emotions. And funnily enough, even older primary school children still get a kick out of Play-Doh and slime. So you need to lie in bed with them at night, read a story, have lots of contact opportunities with them. Our children are also emotional beings, and I've heard from many parents that they're struggling with high levels of frustration, meltdowns, tantrums, students being defiant, I don't want to do it. And many times this comes from children being powerless, they don't have control, and they don't understand. So typically we say the terrible twos because they throw tantrums at 2. And the reason why they do that is because they're developing, and suddenly they're not understanding the world around them and why they can't make choices. So in order to help them process this, we can give them power by including them in decisions and giving them choices. Obviously, these are within reason and things that affect them. So for example, you know, it could be anything that they're frustrated about, but give them a couple of choices. What would you like us to do together for dinner tonight? Or, you know, you finished your work today, you can choose 1 or 2 special treats tomorrow. candy or more screen time, or we'll go and get an ice cream together and sit in the car and eat it, or something like that. That will give them control by acknowledging their feelings. I understand that you're frustrated. How can we fix it? How can I give you a choice? And a woman called Carol Dweck has done studies. She's a neuropsychologist, and she's done studies on the brain, and it's been proven that the brain grows under stress and pressure. And when we struggle and get things wrong, the synapses in the brain fire, and the brain is actually growing. So encourage your children that it's fine for us to be going through this. It's been said before. It's fine for us to struggle and not understand, but acknowledge their feelings and listen to them, and just say, I understand that it's hard. I understand you're frustrated. And then again, as it's been said before, we model and share positive coping strategies. So we are also going through stressful time. I left China at the end of January because of the virus, and now I'm stuck in South Africa, and we've had to deal with a 6-hour time zone difference, and my children have still been doing online schooling. So I have days when I'm also frustrated. When I wake up at 6 in the morning, I have a whole morning of emails waiting for me. And there are days when I can just say to my girls, you know, I'm really struggling today. And I can model positive coping strategies. Let's exercise, let's go for a run, let's go for a drive, and then they copy us. And that's the biggest thing about children, starting from the youngest age, is that they imitate their parents. So that modeling is extremely powerful. In Montessori training, you're not actually supposed to explain how to do an activity with words. You have to show and demonstrate how to do an activity with the materials, with your hands, and use as few words as possible. And the premise and the argument behind that is that children don't always listen to your words, but they watch you so closely, and it's so true. So everything that you do, and Zuko said this as well, if you're stressed and anxious, they will pick up on that. So sometimes if you're having a bad day, you can tell them and go into your room and get rid of your frustrations, but try not to let that spill over to your children. And remember that you don't need to fix the problem. You can't fix the problem. We can't fix coronavirus, and we can't fix our children, but we can just go through these steps and processes so that they can start to understand how all of this is happening and fitting into the world together. And then this has been said a number of times as well. Our children need routine. You can ask any teacher anywhere in the world, but no effective learning takes place if there's no routine. Now in IB, we use a word called agency. And agency is, as I said before, voice, choice, and ownership. And basically, we weave it into everything we do. In the International Baccalaureate curriculum, we have to give the children that ownership in their learning, in the classroom structure, in the classroom rules we set up at the start of the year. They have a say in everything they do. So you can develop a schedule together with your children at home and give them agency. So I had to do this with my youngest daughter, because even though she was up at 7 for classes, after her Zoom classes, she struggled to kind of stick to a schedule. And so we worked out a schedule, and you can leave time for your subjects, say 20 minutes for each subject, and longer for your older children and into high school. But what's important here is to note how your child focuses and concentrates. And this is something all teachers will tell you, all students, and this has been said already, that everyone learns differently. So this needs to be flexible, these time limits. And if your child is tired, you need to adjust for it. Leave time for breaks and eating. This is like a normal school day with a schedule. Time for moving and exercise. Make sure your children are getting enough sleep. that you're preparing healthy meals with fruit and vegetables, not a lot of junk food that's going to make them tired and lethargic. But most important, if you have a schedule, stick it on the fridge where everybody in the house can see it. Everybody knows about it, but be flexible according to your child's needs. There are days when they're fatigued and they need a break. This is exhausting. And I've been doing this, our school's on holiday now, but we've been doing online learning for 18 weeks. And my teenagers are completely burnt out. So it's important to be flexible. And there are days when I just said to them, you know, just take a break. And then they panic because they're not done with their work. But they also need that space. These are things that we never had to deal with as children. The magic of 10 minutes. So many of you are working from home, and you schedule time for your meetings, and you need to schedule time for your child. Take 10 minutes or 15 minutes out of the day where your child knows that that is their time, and that is a time for you to connect. And be intentional about this time. Put your phone away, close your computer, don't have any distractions, and do some sort of activity together. Go for a walk together, ride a bicycle together. They need this time to de-stress and connect with you and relax. And this is the time when they're going to start opening up and talking about what they're struggling with. And I'm thinking particularly of those students that are lacking motivation. You really need to, we can throw a bunch of techniques and suggestions at you, but my question about a child that's lacking motivation is, I would want to dig and get to the bottom of what that lack in motivation is. Is it because they're not seeing their friends at school? Is it because they're dependent on the classroom routine and that environment? We've found in our school that some students have absolutely thrived, as Mr. Fenter said, doing online schooling. They're introverts, they love that they can manage their own time. And then we've also found students that are missing their friends and they struggle to be motivated in the home environment. So for that 16, 17-year-old boy, and even the 6-year-old, the 4-year-old is different. I would definitely want to have those open conversations and connect with that child and find out what is causing that lack of motivation, and then build it up from there. A 16, 17-year-old my daughter's 17, and the motivation for her is that in a year's time she will graduate from high school and she's looking at university options. And so even today she has work to do, and even though we are on holiday, and she just said, Mom, I'm just not motivated. And we were talking about it, and I just said to her, Sarah, you know, you just have to hold on to the fact that you have a year left and it's university. So for her, she just said, yes, Mom, I know that's my goal. And I think she just needs a breather before she knuckles down and gets the next lot of work done for next year. But I think that this 10-minute connecting time, it can be longer depending on your schedule, but I would definitely use this to try and get to the bottom of what my child is feeling and what's really going on in their heart. And a way to open up that conversation is to talk about yourself. Like, gosh, you know, I really struggled today because I missed a meeting or whatever, and I've got a lot of work to finish tonight before I go to bed. And, you know, just sort of, how was your day? And try and create that connection and that time where you can connect. In our home as well, we like to cook together. So the girls put some music on and we'll all share the load, and that's really a time when we can just, they can be silly in the kitchen and dance and then they relax, and then they might talk about things that are bothering them. Structure has been said before. Zuko was talking about a special space. I completely agree. Each child needs to have a space for working where their things are. So again, agency. create the space together. Which chair would you like? What's more comfortable for you? Would you like a cushion? Can we clear this space? What stationery do you need? And let them take ownership of that space. Now, younger children like preschool and lower primary, grade 1, 2, may not want to work alone. They may want to share a space with mom or dad. So you could put your desk or your computer or your work area near theirs. And you could use this as an opportunity to build a mutual respect. So mommy has to work for 20 minutes in quiet. We can look at the clock. Let's set the timer. Let's work for 20 minutes. I'm in a very important, I've got very important work, and so have you. And build that mutual respect after 20 minutes when the time is gone, or you've looked at where the long hand is now. You can have a break and let them go for a play. And this will build the routine and the structure will build their independence and their autonomy. And as was said before, this is what we want to develop. We want our children to become independent, responsible learners that are not micromanaged by parents and teachers. And the way we do that is by giving them bits of control along the way. Now, very interesting, today I actually had a chat to a friend of mine who is in the medical profession in England, and she was telling me she works with in a hospital, in a pediatric hospital, and she was just saying that there's growing evidence during COVID-19 that teenagers are being admitted to these hospitals with paracetamol overdoses and mental health issues. And the problem is that parents are so absent and not creating the structures and routines that the teenagers need. And the school day is everything is created for the students. We give them the structure they need. They follow the schedule. They have to be here at this time, and if they're late, there's trouble, but it gives them structure. They haven't learned to structure their days. We haven't taught them those skills yet, to be a self-starter, self-learner. So they're completely thrown into a new environment. And as adults, we have that to a certain degree, some more than others. And we've had to develop that in our professional environment. And we need to guide and help our children structure their time and their workspace. Even our 17-year-olds or 18-year-olds, or as Mr. Venter said, our matric students are going to need the most support. So don't think that you have a teenager and they need to be independent, because they've never had to do this before. And we didn't have to do it when we were 17. So take that time to have that conversation, build that structure and routine in, so that we can avoid this paracetamol overdose and this kind of mental health issue, where this stemming from students that, as Zuko said, sleeping all day, playing games all night, and not getting to their schoolwork. For our youngest children, parents can create a space for play. So now I'm just thinking of that mom who wanted motivation for her 3 or 4-year-old child. First of all, as Albert Einstein said, play is the highest form of research. I couldn't agree more. Play is a child's work. Play is extremely valuable, and I cannot stress this enough. From an early learner point of view, there's a set of perceptual skills. If you've ever had to take your child to an occupational therapist and you have a report, you'll notice they mention all those skills. Many of those skills are developed from healthy play. If a child has not played properly or played well or played intentionally or meaningfully at a young age in different ways, many of those skills are not developed. This kind of space for play does not need to cost you anything. I'm sure that you have a lot of toys at home that are never played with, and it also does not necessarily need to be a playroom. Many of us don't have that kind of space in our homes. It can be a corner of the dining room, a corner of the bedroom, a corner of the lounge, the veranda outside with a box. Sometimes young children don't want to play alone, they want a presence. So take your computer and your work and sit nearby. This next point is extremely important. Limit the number of toys. Pack 90% of those toys away and take a few things out. And I've taught preschool, and on a daily basis, we would not unpack every toy we had in the cupboard. That would be ludicrous. We would take out wooden blocks and dinosaurs and a couple of things that fit together. And those are the toys for 2 or 3 days until you see maybe you could add something or take something away or switch something up. And have that organized on a shelf so that when they finish playing, they can put it back. So it's not your responsibility. Put out the train set, put out the cars and the blocks and things that work together. And the more you do this, the better you'll get at figuring out what they like, what they don't like. Put out the Lego, but don't put everything out together. The child can't focus on all of that stuff. And then there's parents tend to think they buy their children toys to entertain them. Play is not entertainment. Self-directed play is when the child's brain engages, they're learning, they're imagining. This is what your child needs to get into. You're not entertaining them by handing them a toy. And the last misconception, and I'm sure many parents have heard this in the last while, I'm bored. Boredom is good. It's the start of creativity. It's where children get out of that mode of I need to be entertained, and they start switching over into meaningful play and self-directed play. So if your child is bored, just say, look, there's a couple of things there, and I want you to think about something with your imagination, and try and encourage that healthy self-directed play. About learning. Any teacher will tell you that learning can never be perfect. There is never a perfect lesson. There is a good lesson and a good day, but never perfect. So as a parent, give yourself a break. If you're trying really hard and you feel like you have good days and bad days, that's fine. The journey of learning for all of us is about getting to know yourself. And remember that your teenagers don't know themselves that well yet. They can't put their fingers on what the best way for them to learn is yet. So allow them space to develop that process. Even as an adult now, and I've been in education for 20 years, I go to workshops and training seminars around Asia, and I learn more about myself as a learner. So for me, it's a journey of self-discovery. So allow your child space to come to terms with where their strengths are. There's a lot written about different types of learners. And, you've got visual, auditory, tactile, kinesthetic learners. You can read up about it. Learning is different for everybody. I'm a visual learner. My one daughter is more kinesthetic. She likes to touch and feel things while she's learning. And most of all, Maria Montessori said, follow the child. So that is a very special thing where you actually just sit back and watch your child and get to know them. And I would encourage you as a parent, it's a treat for you to have this time with your children. Typically teachers get to see their other people's children achieve many milestones along the way. And now you have an opportunity to sit back and relax and observe your child achieve those milestones. So following the child just means you sit and observe them. In a Montessori classroom, when you're doing Montessori training, you're actually supposed to take a chair and sit in the corner for 6 months sometimes and not say anything to any of the children, but just watch them. So you can learn a lot about your child by watching them, and you can learn about how they learn and their learning style. Don't put your child in a box. Your child is not going to be the same as your neighbor's child or their friends, and you need to celebrate those things. I have 3 daughters and they are all different, and when it comes to their schoolwork and their learning, I need to adjust for that. And just remember, there's no right and wrong way of learning, and that's why teachers have to adopt different ways in a classroom to teach. And then be kind to yourself and your child, because everybody needs space right now to figure this out. Right, age and stage. So we've also got some parents who say that the younger learners, like your preschool students or maybe in grade 1, you've seen a regression in their development, like they're not sleeping through the night anymore, or suddenly they're wetting their beds. This is normal. This is normal for a change in routine. And just take that time to offer that security. It will come right. Please don't panic about it. They might be wanting the bottle again at 3 or 4, wanting their dummy again. It's fine. It's all very different and very unsettling. And as I said in the start, they're sensory beings, and just take that time to offer that security and those sensory experiences. Then for our tweens and teens, screen time is something that a lot of parents are worried about, especially our kids that typically are gamers and on social media a lot. You can go onto commonsense.org, and there's a bunch of articles there about working through screen time responsibly with your child. But as Zuko said, open discussions are extremely powerful. And I have had this conversation with my own girls, and we have come to an agreement together about what reasonable screen time looks like, and they've taken ownership of that. And we've spoken about obviously what healthy screen time is. And so use agency in this situation. It can be quite an emotive topic, and they can get quite worked up about it because they're very passionate about it. And in our family, I use that scripture in Luke 16 verse 10 a lot with my girls. They like to be independent, as was said before. And so where the independence comes, I always say to them that if you're faithful with the little things, you can be trusted and you'll be faithful with bigger things. But if you're not faithful with the little things, then that privilege gets taken away. So yeah, I encourage you to build that rapport with your child. It's really wonderful having teenagers. I can completely understand why Damien and Zupa and Mr. Fent, I've never been a high school teacher, but enjoy them. I love that I can speak to them, and they're becoming adults and they think deeply, and it's a blessing. Now, an interesting point in online learning around the world, 2 terms have developed that were never spoken about before, and that's synchronous versus asynchronous learning. And basically synchronous learning is where children have live interactive Zoom or Skype or Google Hangouts classes with their teacher. So there's interaction, and there's a whiteboard, and they can write and annotate, and the teacher can write and annotate. And asynchronous is when there's a video that's sent out, and so I'll read your question later. And what studies have shown is that synchronous teaching doesn't really cause a lot of Zoom fatigue, and it's even more helpful and more beneficial than asynchronous learning, which doesn't have any interaction, and basically you're just looking at a screen. So just be mindful if your child is just looking at a screen, watching the teacher's video clip, watching tutorials, that is going to cause Zoom fatigue. And there will be times when you need to respect that they need a break from that. Our girls would wake up at 7 and have a class at 7:30, 8:30, 9:30, 10:30. And by 11:30, after that class, they were completely worn out. So, you know, they had to have a good hour break before they could get on with their work. So just know, another interesting thing for young learners, for tiny little 2-year-olds, synchronous learning is not damaging for younger learners. So if they want to do a Skype call to granny or their friend down the road, and they're having a conversation and they can see that feedback, that's perfectly fine. All right. Then I've said this before, the quote up there, children are great imitators, so give them something great to imitate. You model the behavior for them. Build a mutual respect. You respect them, they respect you. Handle conflict calmly. Take a step back if you feel that you're getting a little bit worked up. And process lockdown emotions by talking to them, and be very open about the process, because as parents we also have our own challenges. I'm almost at the end here. There's a very interesting article, you can look it up on the Huffington Post, and it's called Life Skills Parents Teach Kids Coronavirus Pandemic. Okay, you could just use that in your search, but it's basically, you could put in 4 life lessons into your search on HuffPost, and you'll get that article. And basically, these have been said before, but children are learning valuable skills that they would not have learned had they been at school. So I have to stress and emphasize and agree with the previous speakers that the content is not the most important thing right now. So our children are learning to live with uncertainty, and this is not a bad thing. Life is full of uncertainties. Be honest with them, have those conversations with them. My daughter often comes and says, Mom, when are we going back to China? You know, they want to get back. I have to tell them, I don't know. But my faith grounds us, and I always just say, I know that Jesus has my back, and you know, he'll look after us. Your children are learning how to be resilient. We all, and I was fascinated to hear that Zuka was saying that the teenagers were anxious and they felt that their lives had come to an end. Yes, we will all be okay. We will make it through this. There have been pandemics before. People have survived, and we need to be sensible. I just have to share with you that before we moved to China, we lived in Malawi for 3.5 years, and it was a fantastic experience. And around us, we have people who are sick and dying from cholera, malaria, typhoid, hepatitis, and all those diseases, and bilharzia, a reality. And we can't live in fear. You just have to be sensible. Take the right medicine, do the right checkups, make sure you don't eat food from a strange place. And we were okay. And that's what I've often said to my family. You know, we lived in Malawi, or anywhere where you live where there's disease, and just be sensible. We will be okay. Another thing our children are learning is they are so much more than school and extracurricular activities. They have an opportunity now to explore more things, and they can just be. So please take the pressure off them as far as curriculum is concerned. Mr. Fenter said as well, obviously the biggest concern is for our matrics, but if, you know, I was just checking up on my teachers to make sure that we got through the basic maths curriculum and our basic literacy curriculum. And I think, as has been said, they've learned amazing skills that many of us never learned even when we went to university or we did our further studies. Our children are learning the important role in the family. They're part of the team. They get to be part of chores, and generally that they are important at home. Parents and children have never spent this much time together. So it's important for them to know that they have chores, but that they fit into the family and they are important. And I think a lot of our mental health issues with our teenagers these days happen because parents are so busy and so absent. And this is an opportunity to right that wrong. And finally, as parents, be gracious to yourself. I think that 95% of parents are very intentional about trying to get online learning right. Find the balance. There are things that you will do well, and there are things that you won't do well. And pat yourself on the back if you feel you're doing a good job as a parent, and just have that conversation with a friend and mention it to your partner or your spouse, and take time for a cup of tea or coffee and exercise, and put that in your schedule every day as well. And lastly, I'll just share a scripture with you that's always meaningful to me and very pertinent in this situation. Philippians 4, verse 4-7, rejoice in the Lord always. I say it again, rejoice. So In that line, I would say that stands out to me as focusing on the positive. Like, there are difficult circumstances around us, but let's rejoice in the Lord and let's focus on the positive. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. And that speaks to me about that modeling of that behavior, agency, working alongside your child to make this work. Don't be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and petitioning, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And this is a conversation you can have with your child. You don't have the answers. I'm not going to be anxious. I don't know what the future holds, but let's pray and let's thank God that He knows what our needs are. And finally, the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. And so that's a process that you can work through with your children in COVID-19. And finally, again, my email address, if anybody would like to contact me, and I'm sure that the staff at Westview will also be able to help you. There's many, many capable people I can see. So yeah, that's the end of my PowerPoint, and I'll read the questions here. I'm not sure if I've answered all the questions that were asked, but I'm going to hand back over to James now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Catherine, for that insightful look and presentation. It was wonderful. I really enjoyed it. Okay, let me just read this question from Kathleen, and then maybe we can just take a moment just to answer it. And then if there's any other questions, or if we just have closing thoughts and comments, and then we can finish up. I'll hand over, well, Sipiwe will finish up for us. So just the question: my kids have loved lockdown. My son even prayed the other night, thank you God for lockdown. 3.5 years old, but now he and my daughter, 5, are sick of lockdown. They miss physical interaction with friends. We took them cycling this past weekend, and when I said to my daughter to tell her grandfather what she'd done, expecting her to say I rode 3 kilometers all by myself, she said, I met a girl in the park and we played. That was far more important than the ride. What can we do to give them the social needs they have? Yeah. I think that's we can have it as an open question. Maybe Catherine, if you want, or Damien, or Luca, anyone can.
Now, this is a tough one. I'm gonna start off because they're young kids. I think well, we did quarantine for about 4 months. You know, leaving China, coming here, 2 weeks quarantine, and so our girls definitely have missed the social interaction. But what has made up for it is Zoom calls to friends. So my youngest daughter Emily has a couple of Zoom calls to a friend in Australia and her friends in China, and she's regularly chatting to them. So she's 5. She doesn't have access to a device, but maybe try and hook up with maybe 2 friends' mummies and make time when they can have their own little Zoom call together, and put it on your schedule, maybe once a week or twice a week, and let her manage that by herself. She can log in the Zoom session or Hangouts or whatever tool you're using, Skype. Let her log into the session by herself and take ownership of it, so that it's her special event that she can manage herself. And also, when my children were very small, well, younger, we did give them a cell phone when we lived in Malawi, because it's a transient community and many of their friends moved and lived around the world. And the purpose of that was so that between a certain time, like 5 and 5:30 at night, they could send their friends a text. So she should be able to start writing or sending a voice message. So you could set aside a time for her to send her friends a little voice message, and then she'll receive something back from them. So that will give her a little bit of ownership for social interaction. It's not ideal. They need their friends. I completely understand that. But yeah, I think that will probably be a good way to start.
Yeah, I think with the older ones, very similar sentiments there. Luckily with teenagers, I think because of the stage we're there in, I think we've all noticed that to a teenager, friends are everything. To the majority of teenagers, and so a lot of them have found ways to interact through text, voice calls, Zooms. I think where the difficulty comes in is when we have to channel how much time is appropriate to focus on other aspects of their lives, like schoolwork, and as we unpack the motivation question after this. But in terms of answering that, I think, Catherine, you hit the nail on the head on that one. Yeah, I think the same thing would apply when it comes to teenagers. When it comes to that question about motivation, I think, yeah, that's such a difficult one. I think even to the point, even in work, how do we motivate our workers? That still remains a question up to this day. But I think when you ask the question, you said from a 16-year-old, and a 16-year-old asked that question, and so I think I'll answer it to a 16-year-old, not necessarily to a parent per se. And what I would really say to a 16-year-old, if I was having a conversation, would be that schoolwork, especially schoolwork, it's most of the time it's not fun. It's work. It's tough. It's a lot of things you need to grapple with, and yeah, and I think just from the beginning, just to be point blank, that is schoolwork. It's work. That's what it is, and for us to just have a positive outlook on work. I think also having a chat about what's the point. The one question that teenagers ask a lot is why. Why do I need to do this? And if they can see the reason behind why they're doing this, why am I studying? It might be linked to, I think, as Catherine like mentioned with her daughter, just one way you're pushing through to varsity. So if you can show those links, why am I doing this? Then that helps. It's not just some arbitrary thing that I'm doing for the fun of it. So I like to ask that question: can you see the link between this and where it's taking you? It's a building block for something else. Yeah, and just a couple of things for me that that I tend to push with the high schoolers is just start, like literally just start, and small wins. Sometimes they see this vast amount of work that's very it's very overwhelming. So let's start small. What can I do today? So let me do like an English poem, get that done. And so to think in small chunks. And I think that's something that we've been taught, obviously, how do you eat an elephant? That same thing applies here. Rest, eat well, definitely eat well. Sometimes motivation or the feeling of motivation is linked to how our body's feeling and what are we putting into our body. So let's eat well, let's exercise. The nice thing about the school structure, well, in most schools, is that you have extramurals. That's been taken out. So now we have to be intentional about finding ways to exercise, to go for a walk, to use the creative side of myself. Let me play some music. Let me, those kind of things. So exercise, get some sun, use your creative talent. If you play music, play some music, play your guitar or whatever it is. Also, I think when it comes to academics specifically, a lot of kids tend to compare themselves to other kids. So the lack of motivation comes from a way of thinking that, I won't get this. So I think I'd say, don't compare yourself to other kids or to the pace that other people are learning at. You're going to learn at your own pace. And so let's set goals for yourselves. So if you're going to work on a task, here's your task. How much time can I allocate for myself? If I'm not getting it, who can I connect with? Something that tends to work is connect with another student somewhere like in your school and work together on that thing. That might help with the motivation. Also helps with a bit of accountability. Yeah, and I think it embrace the fact that it's uncomfortable, but it can be fun. And I think when teenagers see that something is fun, then they are more prone to be motivated to do it. So yeah, that's something that I would specifically tell a 16-year-old, put some of those things in place and then try it out. And obviously for some people it will work. For some people it might take a different format, but those are the things that I would say to a 16-year-old.
Awesome. Thank you, Zuko. Don't know, Damien, do you have any thoughts on the motivation question as well? Was that are you fine? Can't hear anything. Oh, that's problematic. Okay. Okay, then I think then if we can move to closing comments. Damien, I don't know what's going on with your sound or anything, but perhaps if you have any final thoughts, you can maybe type it. Otherwise, over to Catherine or Zuko or Damien typing for any closing comments. Otherwise, I am aware of the time. So then if you guys don't mind, I'm going to hand over to Superior to just give a bit of a thank you and to close for us. Is that fine?
Yeah, that's
Yes.
perfectly fine. Thanks, James. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. Wonderful. Thank you. Over to you, Superior. Thank you.
Thanks, James, and thanks to our panelists. I think this was one of the most informative webinars that we had. So thank you to Damien, Zuko, Mr. Fenta, and to you, Catherine. I'm sure this is one of those that we will want to distribute even after tonight. So because of the information that was shared here, so we'll try to find ways to make sure that we distribute it to people as widely as we can. But I just want to take this moment and just to thank the four of you for preparing for tonight, but also for setting aside time for this important task. And we know that you are all people of faith. And so I would like to close off by just praying for God's blessing upon you and upon the work that you do. So if we can just close our eyes and pray shortly. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you that you are a faithful God, a God who calls, that as you call us into various aspects of serving you. We thank you for this man and this woman who is serving you within the education sphere. We thank you that they are such a positive influence over the lives of young children as well as teenagers. And so we just want to thank you for them, want to thank you for their faith, want to thank you for enabling them to serve you in this particular way. And so we just want to pray for your blessing upon them, their families, and the work that they do. And as we pray for your blessing upon them, we are mindful of the various teachers around the world who are going through a similar experience of trying to navigate through this pandemic. And we ask that you continue to lead, to guide, to protect, but also to give us your peace. And we pray this in the wonderful name of our Lord, Savior, and friend, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you
Any
very
last
much.
comments from you, James?
Just to say that this recording will be available on the Westview website. And then like Superior said, we'll look for alternate ways to distribute it and get it out there. Maybe putting together some kind of promo video or some kind of shorter edited version that we can distribute on WhatsApp. Yeah, or we can make it available on like Dropbox or something like that. But otherwise, on our website, you will be able to download it. And then lastly, just to say that next week is our final webinar of the series that we're doing for the month of June. And we're going to be looking at all those who are immunocompromised and just discussing a little bit about that, what lockdown looks like for them and just different ways of how to tackle it. So we're looking forward to that. And it's going to be another good discussion. And so we welcome and invite all of you to join for that as well. Thank you so much from all of us at Westview Methodist to each of the panelists once again for your time. It was wonderful. Thank you. Have a good night.
So, thank you very much. Bye, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.